For 3 decades, Johnny Carson was the undisputed monarch of late-night TV. From 1962 to his retirement in 1992, The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson was not only a show, but a cultural institution. Carson sat down for more than 22,000 interviews, presidents and prime ministers, Hollywood stars and oddballs nobody had ever heard of, world champion athletes and small-town eccentrics who juggled chainsaws or played the spoons. And all the while, Carson was the steady one. His dry Midwestern humor, witty timing, and rock-solid cool converting live television into something that felt spontaneous. He was seldom flustered, hardly ever furious. And if something did go amiss, he could make it into a joke before home viewers even realized it. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. But in 1987, something occurred that shook him to his very foundation. That evening, Carson had to deal with a guest who not only unnerved him in front of the cameras, but left him actually angry when the cameras went away, an emotion so unusual among his coworkers that years later, people who were there still recall it clearly. The guest was Madonna, whose popularity had reached its zenith as pop's greatest enfant terrible. The outcome was an interview so awkward, so unappealing to Carson, that sources claim it irrevocably altered the way he handled celebrity culture for the remainder of his career. Producers, writers, and crew members who were present have since identified 10 major reasons why Carson was so upset with Madonna's demeanor. These reasons, the 10 cardinal sins, not only account for the fact that the interview became notorious behind the scenes, but also for why it signaled the beginning of the end of Carson's storied career. 1. She turned every line into a sexual joke. Johnny Carson was no prude. Indeed, one of his hallmarks was the subtle double entendre spoken with a wink in his eye. He could raise an eyebrow, hesitate for a beat, and have the entire audience howling at a line which was clean and dirty simultaneously. The brilliance of Carson's innuendo lay in the fact that it operated on two planes. Children missed it, adults caught on, and everybody laughed without blushing. Madonna's visit in 1987 was a whole different story. From the moment she sat down, she allegedly hijacked almost every conversation and redirected it into something blatantly sexual. Ask her a question about her music, and she'd respond with an off-color joke. Bring up her career as an actress, and she'd steer it into innuendo. As one writer on the show described, Johnny once said, "True comedy requires range." Madonna turned every single thing into the same tired punchline. For Carson, it wasn't the material that irked him. He'd spoken to edgy comedians and suggestive stars before. It was the directness. What Madonna did was not subtle innuendo. It was raw shock value, done again and again. To a professional like Carson, who thought that comedy was rhythm, variety, and cleverness, this wasn't boring. It was borderline rude. 2. She made the show about her, not the conversation. The Tonight Show with Carson was not a monologue vehicle, it was a dance. Guest and host danced together, creating a natural rhythm, offering and taking in ways that felt spontaneous. With Madonna, however, according to insiders, there was no dance, only a performance. Johnny would put her on the spot with an excellent question that could have evolved into an excellent story, said a producer. And she'd just plow right through it with something she obviously prepared to say. What ended up happening, according to employees, was like observing two individuals engaging in different conversations on the same stage. Listening was more important to Carson than nearly anything else in interviews. He thought the magic of live TV was spontaneity, two individuals responding to one another in real time. Madonna had no interest in responding at all, though. She was there to provoke, not to talk. To Carson, this violated the cardinal rule of his program. And instead of working overtime to salvage the segment, Carson did something he rarely ever did. He checked out. He reclined, posed simple questions, and allowed her to dig herself in. The awkwardness became part of the show, and viewers took notice. 3. She embarrassed Carson on his own stage. Carson's stage was inviolable. For 30 years, regardless of who the guest was, he was always in command. But that evening, for one of the rarest moments in his career, viewers witnessed Carson look authentically uncomfortable. A later explanation by a camera operator was that Johnny had a body language code. If he slouched forward, he was interested. If he slouched back, something wasn't working. During the Madonna interview, he was about to push his chair away from his desk. He even wouldn't make eye contact, looking at Ed McMahon or right at the camera, a silent SOS his long-term fans knew. For Carson, losing his cool on national television wasn't merely uncomfortable, it was embarrassing. And worse, Madonna had set him up for a lose-lose. Confront her, and he'd risk making an ugly scene on national television. Go along, and he'd violate the standards he'd maintained for 3 decades. That trap being made to squirm in his own domain, Carson never forgave. For she disregarded his unspoken class and timing rules. Humor was a balancing act, Carson thought. Sophisticated and edgy, adult but tasteful, and shocking, but only when you had earned it. Madonna didn't have any notion of that balance in his view. She clanged on the same raw note uninterrupted and without rhythm, wrote a critic. Carson, who frequently likened comedy to music, found her style akin to hearing someone bang away at the piano keys with their fists and label it a concerto. To Carson, timing wasn't merely technique, it was respect for the audience. Anyone could command attention by speaking dirty, but making a joke work so that it landed with grace? That was the art. Saying Madonna take the easy possible route to laughter revolted him, not because she was sexy, but because she was lazy. 5. She ignored the audience's energy. One of Carson's most valuable assets was his sense of audience response. He knew when a crowd was flagging, when a joke was landing too harshly, when tension had to be released. And he always made the change. Madonna refused to adapt. As her lewd jokes started to elicit nervous laughter, even silence, she went further only. One camera operator remembered, you could feel the unease spreading through the studio, but she didn't care or didn't notice. To Carson, this was unthinkable. He viewed himself as representative of the audience, their protector. His deal with viewers was faith, that they could watch with their children still awake and not feel caught off guard. Madonna violated that faith, and Carson, sitting there in frustration, seethed. 6. She wasn't prepared, she was just provocative. Carson respected preparation. Guests did not require memorized speeches, but he enjoyed when they arrived prepared to offer anecdotes, commentary, or narratives that presented something authentic. Madonna, sources claimed, appeared to arrive with only a single idea, to offend. She wasn't much of anything, one writer later remembered. It wasn't even rebelliousness. It was provocation for the sake of provocation. Carson never had a problem with edgy guests whose outrage served a purpose, political radicals, cultural innovators, even extreme comedians. But Madonna's provocation struck him as empty, aimed only at creating tabloid buzz. To Carson, that made a difference. He used to tell backstage, don't confuse attention with accomplishment. Madonna, in his opinion, had done just that. 7. She refused to play the game. The Tonight Show rested on unwritten rules. Carson posed leading questions, guests answered with anecdotes, and they worked together to create the impression of spontaneous conversation. It was a game, structured but spontaneous. Madonna would not play along. She dodged setups, dictated her own agenda, and ignored the format altogether. Johnny used to equate interviews with dancing, recalled a writer. With her, he was attempting to waltz, and she was flailing to some other rhythm altogether. The infuriating aspect for Carson was that these rules weren't limiting. They were in place to make the guests sparkle. Madonna's rejection of the system not only made Carson's task more difficult, it undermined her own chance at engaging with the audience. And that, for Carson, was not only disrespectful to him, but to the medium as well. 8. She was banned, softly but firmly. Carson almost never banned guests. Even when interviews went badly, he usually believed in giving people another shot. But after 1987, Madonna never appeared on The Tonight Show again, not once before Carson's 1992 retirement. He didn't make a public declaration. That wasn't his style. Instead, he quietly told the booking team, "I think we've had enough of Madonna for a while." Everyone understood what that meant. Fewer than a dozen guests ever received such treatment, typically for conduct Carson found to be inherently disrespectful to the program and its viewers. Madonna was added to that list, another indication of just how disturbed the evening had left him. 9. She hurt the show's reputation for that night. For 3 decades, families in America relied on Carson's Tonight Show. Parents were able to fall asleep with the television still on, certain nothing would occur that would embarrass their children. Madonna destroyed that trust, at least for one night. Carson apparently feared most about audiences in states such as his home state of Nebraska, individuals whose values were similar to his own. Would they now perceive the show as less wholesome, less upscale? He was so anxious that he requested the producers censor the Madonna piece for repeat broadcasts, an unprecedented action for him. For Carson, the shame wasn't personal embarrassment. It was the fear that Madonna's performance had tarnished an institution he'd spent 3 decades building, and that more than anything he considered unforgivable. 10. It marked a turning point in Carson's patience with celebrities. Before 1987, Carson often tolerated younger stars who were rough around the edges, trusting time would polish them. After Madonna, that patience wore thin. As reported by staff, Carson instituted new booking rules. Emphasize substance rather than sensation, insist on guests who had a respect for the format, and be willing to wrap up a segment early if a guest was crossing into Madonna territory. He even created a secret signal, tapping his tie, to instruct producers to break for commercial early if a guest was getting too close to Madonna territory. The ripple effect spread on television. Other programs silently followed Carson's higher standards. A new precedent was set. Regardless of your stature, respect for format was not up for debate. In an odd way, Madonna's failure made The Tonight Show stronger by compelling it to establish its values more sharply. The night Carson never forgot. In the sweeping arc of Johnny Carson's career, a single cringe-making interview in 1987 may seem insignificant, but to those closest to him, it left a deep wound. For a man who took pride in control, timing, and elegance, Madonna's act embodied everything he abhorred: sloth, shock without substance, disrespect for the viewer, and disdain for the art of television. Johnny wasn't mad because she was dirty, one producer mused. He was mad because she was lazy, and he wanted more from a person with her talent. Ultimately, Madonna went on to flourish as a provocateur, and Carson was still the king of late night when he retired. But for those in attendance, that night in 1987 was never forgotten. It was the rare moment that the composed host was flapped when the king of late night discovered that even within his own kingdom, sometimes the crown could grow heavy.